In one of my business classes that I was taking in my undergrad studies, we did a Strengths Finder test, and it was sort of like a corporate preparedness. You would find out, I think we read this book called Strengths Finder 2.0, and it was like a Gallup poll type of thing, and you would take this quiz. It was kind of like a BuzzFeed quiz, but you know, in a book, and you add up the different categories, and you end up finding out what your strengths are based on all of your responses. And I found out that, unsurprisingly, I had a lot of ideation strengths. So I had the ability to come up with a lot of cool ideas, and perhaps some of my weaknesses are following through on those ideas and actually bringing things to fruition, which is a very frustrating thing, but it's good to know so that we can collaborate with people that are a good fit, so their strengths might match your weaknesses. And that's what we look for in relationships and in business and this kind of thing. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, finding your strengths and working on your strengths, because that was the big surprise that came out of that. There was a few life lessons that have come from that particular professor, and one of them was to work on your strengths. So this is Earth Tones episode 24, Work on Your Strengths. Yep, it can seem a little counterintuitive because you figure I should work on my weaknesses, but working on your strengths might get you a little further. Before we get into all that, this is Earth Sound number 24. A beautiful sound from our beautiful Earth. That is the ocean on Vanderbilt Beach in Naples, Florida. And I recorded that while I was down in Florida playing some Christmas concerts with my brother. And yeah, that was just my phone, like right next to the shoreline. So you can hear the waves in 3D. All right, for a bit of old news. Now this is a two-handed book. I am a sucker for great coffee table books. Even though I don't really have a coffee table, I love the books. I love the format. I love how heavy they are, and I especially love when they're well printed and the photographs inside them are amazing. So this is an Ennio Morricone coffee table book from Ginkgo Press, and it's called Master of the Soundtrack. And I just got it, and it's really fantastic. So I'm going to pull out lots of things from his career for various bits of old news, but I wanted to start with the beginning. And this movie, Il Federale, The Fascist, that is his first debut. So I'm going to read a little bit about Ennio Morricone's very first score. The Fascist was the first cinema score written and orchestrated by Ennio Morricone and was directed by Pierluigi Urbini. This is a pioneering work in which we can already hear many of those elements that would characterize future compositions by the maestro. A kaleidoscope of sonorities where irony, drama, sentiment, and the search for sounds, at the same time strange and irreverent, are combined to bring the entire soundtrack to life and greatly contribute to the quality of the film. I haven't seen that, but that is now high on my list. And what's great about these books is you get little, you get photographs, but you also get like these great pictures that come from like the notes. And there's pictures of his creative spaces. And so I'll be pulling some more things out of that as we move on. So yeah, The Fascist, Morricone's first film score. He had already been working in the industry, had been writing songs for various singers, so he was already a very active composer, but that was his first movie. So the main discussion for today, working on your strengths. Here's what I've prepared. We often want to overcome weaknesses. With a physical weakness, it's probably a good idea. Our bodies need to be well balanced, especially since our muscles are paired in opposites. But what about our skills? We want to be well-rounded in all things we do. But then there's an infinite amount of skills and a finite amount of time. Fortunately, there are billions of people, and each person has their own strengths. So someone out there has a strength where you may have a weakness. It may seem counterintuitive to prioritize developing our strengths instead of our weaknesses, but when you consider what you can contribute to the world, if you work on your strengths, you can provide something spectacular. So that was the big takeaway that my professor was telling our class about. She was saying, if you only ever work on your weaknesses and you forget about your strengths, then you're pretty much going to be middle of the road in all these different things that you do. And it was in the context of being in music school, so even though we were in a business class, she would reference, if you were to do this with your music, if you have something that is special and you work on it, it could be anything, just anything that you can say, that's my thing. If you hone that, then you can become exceptional at doing that, at providing that for the world. I think when we shift our mindset from just trying to provide the world as much as we can ourselves, if we shift out of that mindset into collectively, what are we able to accomplish together? Then we start to think, well, what can I bring to the table? And what you want to be able to bring is something fantastic. If you imagine life is like a potluck, you're not going to bring like just whatever mediocre dish that you have, because you know that everybody's bringing something. You're going to make whatever is the most spectacular thing that everyone says, oh, I love Julie's cookies. You're going to bring those cookies. So I think that can be difficult for us, and we have to find a middle ground, because say as a musician, we need to become well-rounded in order to eat. We need to be able to read music, play different styles of music. You might play in a wedding band to pay your bills. You might play in nursing homes. You might do any number of things to be able to work. And so that means that you have to be well-rounded to a certain degree. But it's pretty difficult to become equally adept at playing classical guitar as it is to play bluegrass guitar, or even within the same style, to play electric blues guitar like Albert King versus playing like Robben Ford. They're very similar and have similar foundational elements, but the lifelong pursuit of both of those styles, even though they're both electric blues guitar players, are pretty different. Whereas with Robben, you'd have to develop a lot of your jazz fusion concepts, your harmony, and all of the expanded blues world. With the Albert King, you have to go completely as deep as you can into the authentic blues expression. And they all meet in the middle, but we each have our own thing that we resonate with. And what Mike and I were talking about last week was the signal, and to be able to tune into what that signal is that resonates with you. And so I've been thinking since last week's conversation about what is the thing that I do as like my strength, and throughout the years, what has been that through line. And that's led me to what I will talk about a little bit right now with a musical demonstration. So let's think about one of my weaknesses compared to some other players. The Joe Bonamassa, Eric Johnson, super fast. I would need to be able to play that like twice as fast. And granted, I'm on an acoustic guitar, but still, that constant picking, someone like Zakk Wylde picks everything. I can't do that much faster than that. It's already starting to get a little bit sloppy. If I don't use a pick and I just do pull-offs, I guess I can do it a little bit faster. But those blistering fast Eric Johnson, Joe Bonamassa things, I know that like I can't really do that. And it's not from not trying. I've tried. I just tried a second ago. It's cool, and I would like to do a little bit more of it. And at certain tempos I can, but that's a weakness of mine. But one of the strengths of mine is what I think about is this sort of like loose strumming type of thing that allows you to do the like the cold shot thing. So this strumming that comes from a looseness of the right hand, that can kind of hold me back in these other ways because I don't have that precision, but I do have the looseness that allows you to play that kind of shuffle thing. Where you're kind of strumming instead of picking the individual notes. You're picking the individual notes, but you're doing it with a strum, so you're getting all those extra strings, and there's a lot of muting involved. So that type of thing, I think it came from being a kid and listening to Voodoo Child and this kind of thing. And playing with the wah pedal and getting that type of thing with the wah pedal, it led me to need the looser right hand. And that gives me a certain amount of like funkiness, which is cool. So that might be a strength of mine. Now, I haven't worked on that all that much because that's been something that's been a strength, or what I've considered to be a strength. I've probably spent more time trying to shred like the Eric Johnson, Joe Bonamassa thing. But if I were to take my professor's advice, I'd say, okay, what's special that I can do that comes kind of naturally to me? That strummy, funky type of thing, like Stevie Ray Vaughan, that feels more natural to me. So instead of saying I've got that and moving on to the things I don't have, I should say, and maybe I will in this new year, 2026, maybe I'll say, you know what, I'm going to develop that and I'm going to take that further. I'm going to get this right hand to be as strummy and funky as I can, and I'll write riffs and I'll play like that as much as I can because that's something that I can do. That's a strength of mine. So that's a musical demonstration of today. What is on the turntable? I wonder if you've ever seen this. This is called The Ventures in Space. So I think on one of the first episodes I talked about a Roy Buchanan in Space album, and this is The Ventures in Space. What's cool about this is from 1964. It was recorded in October of 1963. So this is like prime time of space. And of course the Ventures were already, playing surf music and were successful, and surf music is really happening. I always get a kick out of In Third Stone to the Sun. Hendrix says, I will put an end to your world. To your world, I'll put an end, and you'll never hear surf music again. I always think about how funny that is. And of course, I love surf music. What's great about this copy, it's a really clean copy. And I can tell that somebody liked this album because the jacket is pretty torn, and they wrote the individual tracks on the back of the sleeve so that you could actually see which song was which without having to look at the label. So I think this was actually a pretty cherished copy of The Ventures in Space. I think it's good. I'm sure you can find it on Spotify, or at least some of the songs. They do things like The Twilight Zone, One Step Beyond. There's a bunch of great tunes on this. So it's a novelty record, but it's from the time where it would make sense to have been made. It's not a throwback to the outer space surf music. It is outer space surf music from 1964. And one of the things I'm inspired by is how Ennio Morricone was making his spaghetti western music in the 60s, and I think that space, space surfy music and that Morricone style Dollars trilogy music, I personally think it's all related, and I think that is super cool. It's that clean, low, sometimes fuzzy actually too, but it has like an ominous, spacious nature to it, those big, low electric guitar parts. Something that helped me this week, being obsessed with Are You Experienced? Like I said, Third Stone from the Sun. I'm thinking about Are You Experienced pretty much all the time since last week when we were talking about like what the signal is and what you most are in tune with. Of course, going into the new year, we think a lot about what we're trying to get going and what we're excited by. And I was thinking, what got me into playing guitar in the first place was Jimi Hendrix. And I've had all of this breadth of experience, which is great, but that original signal is still like what's motivating me. And you can be pulled in so many different directions that I just thought, you know what? At this point, I think the best thing to do would be to become completely obsessed with what feels like the strongest signal. And it relates to what we're talking about this week with the strengths. So after last week's conversation with Mike, I was thinking about that, and I was like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to set up my Marshall. I'm going to play my old Strat, tune down a half step, and I'm just going to be completely obsessed with Jimi Hendrix, and specifically the first album. I've listened to that album pretty much nonstop since last week. I've probably heard the whole album at least 30 times since then. Every night I'm going to bed reading from a biography of Jimi Hendrix. I've been going to sleep even listening to an audiobook of his biography, all of which I've already checked out before. But if I'm driving, if I'm playing, it's just all REO experience this whole week. And as much as I'm tempted to move on to Axis and Electric Ladyland and everything else, I just keep telling myself, like, if you don't know every single note of every single sound of REO experience, then there's still so much to get out of it. Like today, I've played the Third Stone from the Sun line, my whole life, but I hadn't ever really checked out the rest of the song. And when you're just completely obsessed with something, you're listening to it saying, oh, that's a cool little snippet. When I get where I'm going, because I was in the car when I thought about it, when I get to the studio, I'm going to pick up the guitar, I'm going to figure out that little... And you say, okay, cool, that's just a little thing that I got. It's a little bit more than I had yesterday. And so I'm not sure if I'm going to go completely insane by having listened to this album this many times, but one of the things I wanted to mention before we go is if you are like me and you're on Spotify and you're jumping around all the time and you kind of miss the days of listening to a CD on repeat, if you take your phone and you just put that one album on repeat and you can put your phone aside for long enough and you go about your business, then you can just pretend, you can pretend it's a CD that's going around and around. And that's what I've been doing this week, is just resisting the temptation. So for the Experience Hendrix Corporation, I'm sure I'm racking up at least a few pennies worth of plays for you. Signing off now. Thank you for tuning in as always. My name is Jake Pardee. This is Earth Tones, episode 24. You can visit jakepardee.com for more information about me and my music. And you can visit maritimerecording.com for information about you and your music and how I can help and be involved. So thank you for tuning in and looking forward to seeing you next week for episode 25. This is Earth Tones.